And I want to thank Bobby Menez and Sharon Jimenez for organizing this event, and Gina Goldman, who also played a key role in organizing, getting this extraordinary crowd out, and to Bishop Juan Mendez. I'm very grateful to you for coming and for your support, and also Chris Clem, who I think you may have met before, but who's going to come up here, who you saw in the film, who was the former chief of the Border Patrol and has been an advisor to me since I went to the border, and a very knowledgeable and wise counselor. And I'm very grateful to him for coming today, and he's going to sit up here and answer some questions. I saw that Elon Musk yesterday was talking about why he had been a lifelong Democrat since he moved to this country and got his citizenship. And he said he joined the Democratic Party and supported it for all of his life because the Democratic Party was the party of kindness. And that was the Democratic Party that I grew up in. And I think ultimately the impulse to open the border that we saw at the beginning of the Biden administration was, for most Democrats in this country, was motivated by kindness, by a humanitarian impulse, by this idea that the United States should be a welcoming country, and that it was wrong to deny access to our country to people who were fleeing oppression and fleeing difficulties in their own countries. And what I saw down there convinced me that this is not a way of demonstrating our kindness. We have created, through these open border policies, this extraordinary humanitarian crisis. And one of the things that they don't talk about in this film, the people who were coming across that night, the first group of 120 were from Africa, and I didn't get a chance to question them, but we questioned everybody else in the second group. They were coming up in buses, 55 on a bus. The buses are owned and operated by the Mexican drug cartels. I expected to see many people from Latin America and Central America fleeing oppression, fleeing the drug cartels in their own country, removing their families for the sake of safety, making this incredibly perilous journey, tearing up their roots because there was something bad happening in their country that was threatening their lives. But what I saw, we only saw that whole night 2 families from Latin America, one from Peru and the other from Colombia. The first group of 120 was all from Africa. The second group was mainly Asia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tibet, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, India. And when we questioned them, only the 2 groups from Peru and Colombia said that they were here fleeing oppression. The other ones said they were here because they wanted to work. They wanted to do the things, as I said in that film, that all of us want to do in this country. But the puzzling thing to me, the extraordinary thing, is that when they crossed the border, they knew exactly what was going to happen to them. And we subsequently learned from them and others that the cartels are advertising all over the world on TikTok and YouTube. And they're showing the people exactly what's going to happen. They're saying, we will charge you give us $15,000, and we will get you into the United States. And they show them every inch of the way, the different routes they can take, the different choices, and exactly what's going to happen to them when they cross the border. The Border Patrol, which we talked to, were completely demoralized because they have been asked not to do their jobs, which is to secure our border, but simply to act as processing agents to bring new immigrants into this country. And they They process them, they fingerprint them when they come across. If they have a criminal record, they go into one line, but very few of them do. The others are then brought to the airport in Yuma, and they're given a plane ticket, if they can't afford it, or at taxpayer expense through FEMA, to any destination they want in the United States. And you can say, well, that's a kind-hearted gesture from our country. But in fact, all of the people that we talked to had gone through a nightmare. They had been exploited, extorted. Some of them had been robbed. The Peruvian family was robbed by the cartels of all their worldly possessions and their lifetime savings. They were beaten in some cases, and we heard all of these horrendous stories of rape, and you saw the taxpayers of Yuma are financing this center to treat children and women who have been raped with the drug cartels called the final payment before they cross the border. You saw in there this terrified man from Colombia trying to maintain his composure when he told me that his family, that his 18-year-old daughter and her 18-year-old friend had been separated from them by the cartels before they came across the border, and he had no idea what happened to her, and he was pleading with us, please help me find her. 85,000 children have disappeared. We don't know what became of them. And then the ones that come here are given a court date 7 years in the future by the asylum courts. So they are in our country, but they have no legal status and no capacity to work legally. So they are then exploited by unscrupulous employers who pay them $5 or $6 an hour, which is enough to get a little bit of food, but it doesn't get them off the streets. And they fall then on the social safety systems, and they are crushing those systems all over our country. And you saw Mayor Adams make this statement in front of the city council: they are destroying New York. And Mayor Adams, a year ago, was one of the champions of the refugee program, of the program that said everybody should be welcome. And now he's a very, very big opponent. Has been very critical. It's cost New York already $1.5 billion. They're asking for $25 billion to take care of this problem. And the refugees in New York are piled up on the sidewalks in certain parts of the city. The city is housing them now at Randall's Island on the sporting fields. So we have in New York a whole generation of kids who for 2 to 3 years, because of the lockdowns, many of these kids on scholarship trajectories, that their lives are going to be altered whether or not they get that, and they couldn't play their sports because they were locked down. Now they can't play their sports because there are refugees camped on the sporting fields in New York. Oh, it is a humanitarian catastrophe. And, my father was very, very close to Cesar Chavez. He was probably my father's most beloved and important political ally. He helped my father on the last day of his life to win the state of California. And I spent the last 2 decades of his life, I spent doing a lot of work with Cesar on pesticide issues. And his family honored me in 1993 at his death by asking me to be a pallbearer in his funeral, which I did. But during that period of time, Cesar had 2 big issues. One of those was pesticides would disproportionately injure Hispanic farm workers. The other issue was closing the border. That's right. Cesar Chavez was a huge advocate for closing the border because he saw this he saw the illegal immigration as the greatest threat to the welfare of the workers, the American workers, Chicano farm workers, who he was representing, and that this huge influx of illegal labor that could be had for pennies an hour in some cases was dampening the leverage that he had to bargain for his farm workers, to get good wages and conditions. And we all need to start taking a different look. We need in this country, we need high walls, but we also need wide gates. We need to make it so that immigrants have come across legally. And by the way, there have been, over the last 3 years, since the new administration came in, there have been 7 million immigrants who have crossed illegally. During that same period, only 3.1 million immigrants came in legally. And the Mexican drug cartels are running the US immigration policy now, and that's not good for our country, and it's not good for Mexico. And we need to work with Mexico instead of alienating and bullying them. We need to work. We have the worst relationship now with the Mexican government that we've had during my lifetime. And we need to repair that. We need to work together as partners in dealing with this problem. And one of the good news is that the issue is solvable. Everybody we talked to down there said, from the local law enforcement to the ICE to the Border Patrol, all said, and Chris Clem is going to come up here and vouch for this, all said you can shut this down immediately if you do the right thing. And that's what I'm going to do as president. I'm going to secure the border. And I'm going to make an easier, faster, simplified path to citizenship for people who are here legally. And we need to do both those things. And the principal barrier now is that we do not have enough asylum court judges. And that's why these immigrants are given a 7-year delay till they get a court date. And we need to get these cases. I'm going to immediately appoint sufficient asylum court judges. And we can adjudicate all of these cases on the day that the immigrants show up at our border and do it. And do it before they gain entrance to our country. As I said, 90% of the immigrants I saw come across didn't even have asylum claims. They weren't pretending to. And usually about 85% of the people who do have asylum claims, that those asylum claims are deemed not accurate. But you need to do that adjudication at the border, because once somebody makes an asylum claim in this country, they have a right to stay here. And that's why you need to adjudicate it before they come across. And we need to close down the border, because otherwise the drug cartels are going to control it. I'll tell you very briefly one of the reforms I'm going to make, and it's a common sense reform that will be supported by both Republicans and Democrats. It should have been done long ago. I'm going to, the day that I get into office, I'm going to order the State Department to waive passport card fees at the US Post Office, so that every American, whether you're rich or poor, you can go in and get a passport card, which is a federal picture ID. This is important because there are people in this country, particularly poorer neighborhoods and urban areas where people where people are elderly, they have lapsed driver's license, or they've never had a driver's license because they don't drive. And for those people, if you do not have a government-issued picture ID, you are a second-class citizen in this country. You cannot open a bank account. You cannot stay a night in a hotel. You cannot board an airplane. You cannot go visit your children at school. And when you show up at the voting booth, this has caused a huge friction between Republicans and Democrats who say, why aren't you demanding ID? And the Democrats are, well, many of our constituents are too poor to afford their ID. So it's unfair, you're disenfranchising them by demanding it. Well, the solution is to make sure they all have IDs. And this is not mandatory IDs. I'm against that. And once you do that, it solves so many problems that are causing frictions between the parties. For one, everybody will, and this is why Andy Young, the biggest civil rights leaders in this country, Al Sharpton, Andy Young, many others, support this proposal. Because if you give everybody in this country, make sure that they have access to a free federal government-issued picture ID, the issue about demanding an ID at the voting booth goes away. And everybody has to show that ID before they vote. And it reassures Republicans who believe the voting system is rigged, it's being rigged by Democrats, and it reassures Democrats that all of their voters will be counted because they will have that ID. It's an easy fix for this problem, but let me tell you what else it does. It is illegal in this country for an employer to hire somebody who is illegal, who has no legal status. But the employers get away with it because the enforcement of that law allows them to accept a Social Security card. The Social Security card has no picture on it. It's easily fabricated, and it's handed hand to hand, and it's a fiction. For example, in New York, construction firms in New York all know that if somebody who shows that Social Security is almost certainly illegal. And yet, that's all they need to do. They need to just check the box. And then they can pay them a very low wage, $10 or $12 an hour or less, because they know they're illegal. And then that company can go and underbid a union shop who is paying their workers higher. So it destroys the American worker, it destroys the union movement, it destroys people who are legally in this country, their capacity to make a living. And if we make sure that everybody has the right to a federal picture ID, and then we tell employers that is the only ID that you can accept if you want to employ somebody, they must show that federal photo ID. And then if they don't do that, the employer goes to jail. How many employers do you think you would put in jail before everybody stopped doing it? And then what happens? The border issue dries up overnight because nobody wants to come in this country. This is one of the easy, common sense fixes that we should have done a long time ago that would help Democrats and Republicans in this country to find common ground. I want to talk about one other issue that as I crisscross the country and visit Hispanic communities, Latino communities, Chicano communities, that the issue of housing comes up again and again and again. I walked on the picket line several times in the recent weeks with the workers who are boycotting the Fairmont Hotel. And God bless those workers. And I've spent time on the picket line talking to these women who are housekeepers in the hotels. The hotels are, fired a lot of them during COVID and now they're at full occupancy again, but they're not rehiring workers. They're just making their current workers go from 12 rooms to 18 rooms a day that they have to change. And these workers cannot afford to live in Los Angeles. The average housing price in Los Angeles, if you want to purchase a house, is $825,000. That means in order to afford a house, you need to make $212,000 a year. Well, they're not making that. And so they're living in Palmdale, they're living in Victorville, 2 hours ride. And they come here, they go drive to work on a Monday, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they stay in their cars for the week because they can't afford the gas to go back and forth. And that's the life that we've made for them because of the housing issue. And we have in California has the highest rate of homelessness in this country. There are 525,000 homeless people in this country, and there are 35 million people who are on the brink of homelessness. And I'm going to tell you why. Why does California have the highest? California has 12% of the United States population, but it has 50% of the unsheltered homeless. Why is that? I was in San Francisco recently. In 2018, I was part of the team that tried the Monsanto cases in San Francisco. And so I lived in San Francisco and Oakland for about 9 months out of that year. And every day I would go down to Union Square in San Francisco, and I would work out at the gym down there in the morning before I went to court. And in Union Square is like the Fifth Avenue of San Francisco. Tourists come to go shopping there from all over the world. It has all the iconic American stores. It has Macy's and Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom and Gap and Old Navy and Levi. And then it has all the big foreign stores like Dealer Valley and Burberry and Prada and Gucci and all these other big stores. Like I say, people come from Asia, everywhere else to shop on that. Well, I went back there 3 weeks ago to visit it on a campaign trip, and I was shocked by what I saw. All of those stores are now closed. And the biggest mall in San Francisco, which is on that same strip, is shut down. It's just acre after acre of plywood. The occupancy, San Francisco has been destroyed. The occupancy rate in San Francisco office buildings is 35%. We saw a building that was built 5 years ago or 4 years ago for $350 million. It's now on sale for $100 million. So this economy has utterly collapsed. And when you ask people, why is it happening? They say because of the homeless. There's chaos in the streets. The tourists don't want to come. Nobody wants to go shopping. Why does California have a homeless problem? There's many theories that we all share. Is it drug addiction? Is it mental illness? Is it poverty? Is it because other cities ship their homeless to California? Is it because homeless people, when they lose their job and become homeless, say, well, I would rather live in California than Vermont because I'm going to freeze? So they all come here. These are the things we tell each other. But there's University of San Francisco, and a very famous researcher named Matthew Desmond, have done extensive studies on it. And here's what they found. It's not drug addiction, and it's not mental illness, although those are common, although not ubiquitous in homeless populations, and it's not poverty. West Virginia has much higher drug addiction rates than San Francisco. It has much higher poverty rates. San Francisco is the richest city in the country. And yet they don't have a homeless problem in West Virginia, nor do they have a homeless problem in Detroit, which also has higher addiction rates and higher poverty rates. The homeless in California are not coming from other states. They are almost all coming from California, many of them from neighborhoods where they formerly lived in a home. The reason that we have this problem in California is housing prices. That is the reason. And as I said, if you living in Los Angeles, the average price of a house is $815,000. The average price nationally is $215,000 2 years ago. Today, it's $400,000. Why is that? Why did housing prices go up so precipitously? What Matthew Desmond says is what's happened in California is now about to happen in the rest of the country. That social disintegration that comes when people can't buy homes. There's 35% of our population is paying more for basic human needs than they're making in salary. So that's 35% of our population is on the brink of homelessness. And this is a calamity for our country. It's part of the war on the middle class and the working poor of this country. And why is it happening? It's happening, one, because of the inflation, paying for $8 trillion in wars over the past 20 years, paying $16 trillion that the COVID lockdowns cost us, closing 3.3 million businesses, but mainly, and so everything is getting more expensive. Inflation is a tax on the poor. But the real reason that housing has outpaced anything else is because there are three giant corporations, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. And those companies own already 88% of the S&P 500. They're buying up all of our farmland. And now they've decided that they want to own every single family home in America. So when you go, and all of us have, I have 7 kids, 6 of them, when I was their age, I was thinking about buying a home. I have one older one who's 39, the rest of them don't even have it in their mind, and none of their friends do. Kids today, we promise Americans that if this was the American dream, you work hard, you play by the rules, you're going to be able to afford a home. You're going to be able to take a summer vacation, to save for your retirement, to raise a family. But that's just not true anymore. There's nobody in that generation who believes, and that's with one job. Now people have 3 jobs, and they still are, owning a home is completely out of their reach. And it's because when you go out to buy a home, we all hear these stories of somebody, a friend or ourselves, who tried to buy a home, was about to put the money down, sign the contract, go into escrow, and at the last minute, somebody comes in with a cash offer and takes it off the table. And you're saying, who is this with the cash offer? And so you look into it, and it's an LLC with an ambiguous name. And if you pull the strings and follow the breadcrumbs, that leads you to BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. Oh, these companies, the cost of money to them, the cost of a mortgage, is 30% less than the richest people in this country. They pay almost nothing for mortgage, for money. So they can outbid you, and they can outbid your children. And they're now, our kids and our families are now competing against these companies which are trying to buy every single family home. We are on track in this country that within 6 years, corporations will own 60% of the homes in our country. And home ownership is critical to this country. Thomas Jefferson said American democracy is rooted in tens of thousands of independent freeholds owned by families, each with a stake in our system, and each with a stake in democracy. If you don't have that, what we're doing now is an aristocratic model. It's a colonial model where giant corporations own the landscapes and we all become serfs on our own land. It's a feudal system that they're trying to reimpose in this country. And they're doing it because the cost of money is so low to them. And they're, not only that, but if you own a home, as opposed to renting one, and the rental prices, their ownership is now driving the rental prices up. So 48% of people who are renting homes feel that they cannot afford it. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and they have to borrow. We're now living at a time when the average income in our country is $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs, of food, housing, and gasoline. So most Americans are now losing $5,000 a year deficit. They're putting it on their credit cards, and they're paying to Visa and MasterCard and Citibank and Chase and Morgan and Wells Fargo, 22% interest. If the mafia charged you that, it would be called loan sharking and they go to jail. But if those credit card and banks do it, it's just the cost of it's just a business, it's just business as usual. Who do you think owns all of those companies? BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So they've got this, they're doing it right in front of us. They are strip mining the wealth and the equity from the American middle class. If you own a home, as opposed to renting it, you get invested in your community. You care about the schools. You care about police protection. You care about the appearance of your yard. You care about your neighbors. And we become a community again. When they turn us all into renters, so I think my time's up, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do as soon as I get into office. First of all, I'm going to rejig the tax code to make it so that it's no longer profitable for these giant mega corps. And by the way, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard all own each other. So it's just really one behemoth company. And I'm going to make it illegal, or I'm going to make it unprofitable for those companies to go and, and come in like predators and own all of our single-family homes. And here's what else I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new class of mortgages at 3% interest. And this has been done before. It's been done in a limited way by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which now have a $110 billion surplus that nobody is talking about. Oh, that shows what can be done. And I'm going to give every single family homeowner in this country a mortgage at 3%, which for the average family home, it will be about $1,000 a month, which is about $1,000. And I'm going to do it without raising the deficit, which I'm not going to do because our deficits are irresponsible. And here's how I'm going to do it. You know that if you have a rich uncle who will co-sign your mortgage, you can get a much lower rate because the bank is basing your interest rates not on your lousy credit score, but on your uncle's fantastic credit score. So they give you a much lower rate. Well, I'm going to give all Americans a rich uncle. And that uncle is Uncle Sam. And Uncle Sam is going to co-sign your mortgage. And if you default, Uncle Sam can resell the home like they did with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, which is why they have a $110 billion surplus. In order to pay for those mortgages, to finance them, I'm going to issue a new issuance of Treasury bills at 3% interest tax-free. So we will be able to finance all of those. The first $500,000 I'm going to give to teachers because they are the most neglected. Teachers are the most important profession that we have in this country. And they are beleaguered, they're abused, and they're undervalued. And we need to make it so that they can live in the neighborhoods. These mortgages will only be available to people who live in that home and who work in that neighborhood. And I'm going to close with one other idea I want you to keep in mind. We're sending we're already committed $113 billion to Ukraine. And President Biden now wants another $24 billion. Now, just for comparison, the entire budget of the EPA is $12 billion a year. So that's all we've got for the environment in this country. That's it. So we're sending 12 times in 1 year to Ukraine what we spend on EPA. The entire budget for CDC is $12 billion. That's what we got for public health. And how can we afford to send 12 times that much to Ukraine? The month that we made the $113 billion commitment was March of 2022. And that month, we also spent $300 billion, twice what we're getting to Ukraine, to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank. So, and that same month, we cut food stamps to 30 million Americans from $283 a month to $23 a month. And we announced the cuts of 15 million Americans from the Medicare rolls. So, you know, like I said, they're doing this right in front of us. They got plenty of money for the military-industrial complex and plenty of money for the big banksters. But when it comes to working Americans, there is no money. We're broke. So that month, Mitch McConnell was asked, how in the world can we afford $113 billion to Ukraine? When, you know, we have crisis, there's 2 zip codes in Chicago. A recent study showed that the people in those zip codes have worse standards of living than people who live in the most war-torn neighborhoods of Afghanistan. We have a crisis right here in this country. And Mitch McConnell was asked by a reporter, can we really afford to send $113 billion to Ukraine? Here's what he said. He said, yes, because the money's not really going to Ukraine. The money is going to US military contractors, to General Dynamics, to Raytheon, to Boeing and Lockheed. These are American companies, so that money is really coming back here for the good of America. So, who do you think owns every one of those companies? Exactly. And you know, when we give the money to Ukraine, we call it a loan. Of course, how many people here believe that Ukraine is ever going to pay that back? Yeah, nobody. So, and nobody does. There's nobody in Washington who does. The same number of people in Washington believe they're going to pay it back. But what it does is it allows us to put the screws on Ukraine, and we signed a contract with them that compels Ukraine to do certain things. And one of those things is to sell most of its assets for cash, including its farmland. Now, Ukraine has the best farmland in the world. For 1,000 years, there have been wars fought over that farmland. It is the breadbasket of Europe. And people say about Ukraine, about the soil, that if you throw a boot, an old boot, on the ground in Ukraine, something that will grow from it that you can eat, because it's so rich and fertile. And everybody, for many, many centuries, has been trying to get their hands on it. Well, guess what? Now they're being forced to sell it. The small farmers are being forced to give up their land. The government is giving up its. They've already put on the auction block 28%. Who do you think the biggest buyer is of that land? Exactly. So, you know, why are we in this war? We know who's making the money from this war. They're doing it right in front of us, and what they do is, the strategy that allows them to get away with it is they keep us all at each other's throats. So they turn blacks against whites and Hispanics, and Republicans against Democrats and rural people against urban people. And you know, when the rulers in the castle, the king and queen, look over the castle wall, the top, and see all of their subjects fighting, they go back to the dining room and they open champagne and they toast each other. Because as long as we're all fighting each other, we can't see what they're doing. And it's like somebody who's jangling keys over here and saying, look at these keys, look at the trans issue. We gotta be tougher on trans, we gotta be tougher on pregnant women, we gotta be tougher on Mexico. All of these things that they're gonna do. And then over here, they're robbing the bank. And nobody's watching them. But I have my eye on them. And when I get into that office, it's going to be, the payday is going to be over for BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And somebody just a moment ago shouted at me about the DNC. Well, you know, the DNC did the same thing they're doing to me. They did it to Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie Sanders posed a threat to the DNC's donor base. Well, I am 10 times the threat that Bernie Sanders was. And that's why they've raised, my understanding is $2 billion. And do you think they raised those in small donations? No. And no, they didn't. They raised it by somebody, you know, in the White House basement calling all the billionaires and getting the big money from them. And why did they hand it over? Do you think those billionaires and big corporations like Monsanto and Pfizer and BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, do you think they gave those big million-dollar donations to the Democratic Party out of a patriotic impulse? Or out of a humanitarian impulse? I don't think so. I think they think they're going to get something for that money. I think they don't look at that as a donation. I think they look at it as an investment. And I'm going to make sure that they do not get a good return on that investment. I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for your support. And I'll see you later.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.